What would you do if the restaurant that humiliated you and your children 7 years ago was now failing, bankrupt, and desperately for sale? Giving you the perfect chance to buy it. Fire everyone who wronged you, and turn their moment of power into your ultimate revenge. But what happened on reopening night when the former manager walked through those doors again would shock everyone who witnessed it. Before we dive deeper into this story, I would like you to do something. If you love interesting stories like this that expose the truth, please give this video a thumbs up and tell us in the comments section where in the world you are watching this video, and also do well to smash that subscribe button. The sound of expensive shoes on polished floors, crystal glasses clinking softly, laughter floating through the air like music. Josephine Williams walks into the Golden Palace, one of Atlanta's finest restaurants, with her 2 sons, Marcus and Deshaun. They're dressed in their best clothes. Tonight is special. It's time to celebrate a huge win in her career. She wants her boys to see they belong in places like this, in rooms where big deals happen and success gets rewarded. But the moment they step inside, she feels it. The air changes. It's small, but she notices. Conversations stop for just a second. Eyes look their way. A woman at a corner table sips her wine slower. A waiter looks at them, then at the host, like he's waiting for instructions. Josephine straightens her shoulders. She's used to this. She's had to fight for everything she has. She won't let a few stares ruin this moment. She smiles at Marcus and Deshaun. Pretty fancy, right? Deshaun, the younger one, grins. Marcus, older and wiser, just watches. They walk up to the host, a tall, thin man with slicked back hair. He doesn't smile. Instead, he frowns and looks through his reservation book like he's searching for something that isn't there. Williams, party of 3, Josephine says, keeping her voice light. The host takes too long to answer. Then he sighs like this is a big problem. I'm sorry, ma'am, but I don't see your name here. Josephine doesn't flinch. She knows what this is. She pulls out her phone and shows him the confirmation email. I made this reservation a week ago. Here it is. 7:30 p.m. Table for 3. The host barely looks at her phone. There must have been a mistake. We're fully booked tonight. Silence. Josephine hears it before she sees it. Low whispers from nearby tables. The couple sitting close by pretends to study their menus. She grips her purse tighter. A mistake? She repeats. Her voice is calm but firm. I have confirmation. My table should be ready. The host doesn't budge. I'm afraid there's nothing I can do. Josephine doesn't move. She knows she could push harder. She knows she could demand the manager. But she also knows how this always ends. Then, like magic, the manager appears. A middle-aged man with sharp features and an air of importance. He stops next to the host and gives Josephine a fake smile. The kind that says he'd rather be anywhere else. Ma'am, I apologize for the trouble, he says. But as my colleague mentioned, we're fully booked tonight. Josephine looks him in the eyes. I booked in advance. I have proof. He doesn't even look at her phone. I apologize, but we can't seat you this evening. Marcus shifts uncomfortably beside her. Deshaun's eyes dart between his mother and the manager. His young mind tries to understand what's happening. Josephine takes a slow breath. She's faced rejection before. She's had doors slammed in her face more times than she can count. But this is different. This isn't just about her. It's about them. Her boys standing here, watching this happen, learning what the world thinks of them. The humiliation sits in her stomach like a heavy rock. She exhales and nods once. Not agreeing, not accepting, just acknowledging. Then she turns to Marcus and Deshaun. Let's go. Deshaun tugs at her sleeve. But Mom, I'm hungry. I know, baby, she says softly. We'll go somewhere else. And just like that, she turns and walks out. She doesn't argue. She doesn't beg. She doesn't make a scene. Because she knows the real fight isn't here. It's out there. Outside, she grips her keys tightly as she helps her sons into the car. Her hands shake just a little as she buckles her seatbelt. From the back seat, Marcus's voice comes quietly. They didn't want us there. Josephine stares ahead. The streetlights blur into streaks against the windshield. No, she finally says. They didn't. A beat of silence. Then Deshawn, still young enough to hope, asks, "Will we go back one day?" Josephine starts the car. The engine hums to life. She doesn't answer right away. Instead, she looks at them in the rearview mirror. Two boys who deserve to walk into any room with confidence. Who deserve to know that no one can decide where they belong. Finally, she speaks. One day, but not as customers. What Josephine didn't know was that this night would light a fire in her. One that would change everything. Josephine didn't sleep that night. She lay in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying every second of what happened. Not just how the manager dismissed her. Not just the host's fake concern. Not even the whispers from other diners who watched but said nothing. No. What haunted her was the look in Marcus's eyes. The understanding. He was only 12, but he recognized it. The lesson. The unspoken rule that places like that weren't meant for people like them. And Deshawn, only 8, still too young to fully understand what happened, but old enough to feel it. To feel the sting. Josephine clenched her jaw. She had worked too hard for this. Spent years building something from nothing. Late nights, early mornings, sacrifices. She refused to let one night define her. But what if it had defined them? What if, without realizing it, her sons had learned that lesson too well? She pushed herself up in bed and reached for her laptop. If they weren't going to give her a seat at the table, she would build her own. Josephine had always been a fighter, raised by a mother who worked 2 jobs just to put food on the table. She knew hustle before she knew anything else. And now she poured all that fire into her catering business. Every rejection became motivation. Every roadblock became an opportunity. Every no fueled her next move. She worked harder than ever. Her mornings started at 4:30 a.m., testing recipes, managing orders, making deliveries before the city woke up. By midday, she was balancing books, hiring staff, taking meetings, scaling the business one smart move at a time. At night, when her boys were asleep, she sat at the kitchen table with a notebook full of ideas, mapping out the next steps. She wasn't just building a catering company. She was building a brand, and people started to notice. Her flavors were amazing. Word spread. One event turned into 10, 10 into 50. Soon her business was serving corporate events, weddings, private dinners for high-profile clients. She went from renting a small kitchen to owning her own space. From struggling to pay bills to creating jobs for others. From knocking on doors to having her phone ring nonstop. Success wasn't just a dream anymore. It was real. But even after all the wins, the press features, the record-breaking profits, she never forgot that night. Never forgot the way Marcus looked at her in the car. The quiet anger in his voice. They didn't want us there. That moment had buried itself in her bones. One afternoon, nearly 7 years later, Josephine sat across from her business partner, Robert Thompson, discussing investments over lunch. He scrolled through his phone, rattling off numbers about restaurant closures and opportunities. Then casually, he said something that made her pause. "You know the Golden Palace? That place is going under." Josephine's fork stopped midair. He kept talking, unaware that she had completely left the conversation. The restaurant. That restaurant, struggling, failing, dying a slow death. A slow breath left her lips. "That's interesting," she said. keeping her voice even. Why? Robert shrugged. Bad management, declining sales, poor customer service. It's been on the market for months. No one wants to touch it. Josephine looked down at her plate. She had spent years burying that night, using it as fuel to build her empire, to make sure her sons would never feel like outsiders in their own success. And now the universe had placed this in front of her. She had a choice. She could let it go, keep moving, act like it didn't matter anymore. Or she could buy it. Josephine sat in her office, staring at the real estate listing on her screen. The Golden Palace, for sale. This wasn't just business. It was personal. Buying a restaurant was a big move, even for her. She had built a thriving catering empire, but running a full-scale luxury dining place was different. Her logical side told her to walk away. It's just a restaurant. Let it fail. Move on. But something deeper wouldn't let her. She glanced at a framed picture on her desk. Marcus and Deshawn, taken years ago. They were just boys when they stood outside that restaurant, confused, hurt, dismissed. Now Marcus was 19, finishing his first year in college. Deshawn was 15, already talking about business like his mother. They had grown, evolved, and so had she. Josephine reached for her phone. "Hey, Michael," she said to her lawyer. "Find out what it's going to take to buy the Golden Palace." 2 weeks later, she walked through the doors of the same restaurant that had once thrown her out. But this time, she wasn't asking for a table. She was here to take ownership. The place looked the same: polished floors, crystal chandeliers, white tablecloths. But it felt empty. There were customers, but not many. The energy was off. A waiter rushed over, mistaking her for a guest. "Good evening. Do you have a—" "I'm here to meet the owner," Josephine said. The man blinked, nodded, then hurried toward the back. A few minutes later, a short, stocky man in his mid-50s emerged from the kitchen. Bradley Morrison, the longtime owner. The man who had built this place from the ground up, only to watch it crumble. "Josephine Williams," she said, extending her hand. He shook it, his grip weak. "You're the buyer?" "I am." Bradley sighed. "Look, I'll be straight with you. Business is bad. The brand is tarnished. Customers aren't coming like they used to. You sure you want this?" Josephine tilted her head. "If I weren't, I wouldn't be here." They sat down at one of the empty tables. Bradley talked numbers, liabilities, overhead costs. He sounded tired, defeated. Josephine listened, absorbing every detail. Then she slid a folder across the table. "My lawyers have reviewed the terms. You're getting a fair deal." Bradley picked up the paperwork. "This place used to be something special," he murmured. "And what happened?" He let out a bitter laugh. "Management got too comfortable. The culture changed. Somewhere along the way, we lost sight of what mattered. By the time I realized it, it was too late." Josephine said nothing, because she knew exactly when this place lost its way. When it decided who belonged and who didn't. When it turned away the wrong person. When it turned away her. Bradley flipped to the last page. "All right, let's do it." Josephine watched as he signed away the restaurant. In that moment, she didn't feel victory. She didn't feel revenge. She felt something bigger. Control, power, the ability to rewrite the ending. "Good luck, Miss Williams," Bradley said, shaking her hand one last time. "You're going to need it." Josephine smiled. "I don't believe in luck. I believe in change." Buying the restaurant was just the beginning. Now Josephine had to rebuild it from the inside out. She stepped inside her restaurant, because that's what it was now, hers. The air felt different this time. Not because the space had changed, but because she had. She wasn't here to revive the old Golden Palace. She was here to rebuild it. And the first step? Cleaning house. The next morning, she called a full staff meeting. The employees gathered: chefs, waiters, bartenders, hosts. They all knew who she was. The new owner. The woman who had just bought their failing restaurant. Some were nervous. Others were skeptical. A few stood with arms crossed, waiting to see what she had to say. "I won't waste your time," she began. "The Golden Palace has a reputation, one that isn't serving it well." A few employees exchanged glances. "It's not just about bad sales. It's about bad culture. That stops today." More silence. Some of you were part of the problem. Some of you weren't. Either way, things are changing. New policies, new management, a new vision. If you're not on board, this is your moment to leave. She let her words hang in the air. A long, tense pause. Then slowly, 3 people stepped forward, including the host who had turned her away years ago. They pulled off their aprons and walked out. Josephine didn't stop them. She turned back to the rest of the staff. "Anyone else?" No one moved. "Good. Let's get to work." The next 2 months were a complete transformation. She renovated the space, updating the design while keeping what made it high-end. She rebranded it. No longer the Golden Palace, but Williams and Company. It wasn't just a restaurant anymore. It was a statement. She retrained the staff, hired new people, promoted those who deserved it. She made it clear that exclusivity had nothing to do with discrimination. The menu got an upgrade. The atmosphere changed. People who had once avoided the restaurant started paying attention again. Opening night arrived, and the energy was electric. Guests flooded in. The media showed up. The restaurant was packed. Josephine stood near the entrance, watching it all. Then, out of the corner of her eye, she saw a familiar face. The former manager, James Mitchell. He wasn't dressed for dinner. He stood just inside the door, looking around confused. He hadn't recognized her yet. Josephine stepped forward. "Looking for a table?" The man turned to her, brow furrowed. Then slowly, realization dawned. His mouth parted, but no words came. Josephine held his gaze. "I can check the reservation list, but I don't see your name." The man swallowed. He looked at the crowd, at the restaurant thriving under new ownership. Josephine let the moment stretch. Then finally, she spoke again. "Enjoy your evening." And with that, she turned away. The night was a success. Every table was full. Every plate was perfect. The buzz around Williams & Co. was undeniable. Then, from across the room, her eyes met Marcus, now 19. He stood beside his brother Deshaun, who had grown into a sharp, confident 15-year-old. They had seen everything that night. The full circle moment. The shift in power. The lesson that had been years in the making. Marcus smirked. "You really did it." Josephine exhaled. "I told you we'd come back." Deshaun glanced toward the entrance where the former manager had been standing. "So that was him?" Josephine nodded. "That was him." Marcus's jaw tightened. "I would have kicked him out." She looked at him carefully. He meant it. But Josephine wasn't here to be petty. "That's not power," she said. "Power isn't revenge. It's being so successful that they have to watch you win." Deshaun's face lit up with understanding. Marcus's expression softened. This was the lesson. That night years ago, the world had tried to teach them they didn't belong. Tonight, Josephine rewrote that story. Not by fighting for scraps, but by owning the table. She reached for her glass and raised it. To never letting anyone tell you where you don't belong. Marcus and Deshaun lifted their glasses. To writing our own story. They clinked glasses, and Josephine smiled. This wasn't just about a restaurant. It was about breaking cycles. About making sure the next generation never had to ask permission to exist in the spaces they deserved. And as the night carried on, as laughter and joy filled every inch of the restaurant she now owned, Josephine knew one thing for certain. She had already won. Josephine's story isn't just about a restaurant. It's about turning obstacles into opportunities. About refusing to let rejection define you. Sometimes the best response to being excluded isn't fighting for acceptance. It's building something so strong that they have to acknowledge you. So the next time someone tells you that you don't belong, ask yourself, do I need their approval, or do I need to build my own table? Because real power isn't in being let in. It's in making sure the door is never closed again.